Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And before we get started, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Steve Small. You know what you've done, that's very generous, and we're very appreciative of it, so thank you. Now, this video is the first of the day, and I've got to say, wow, what a video. The link to it was actually sent to me by Leslie Roberts, friend of the channel, and someone who's involved, obviously, with the big COVID cover-up and things that's going on there. She presented her evidence a couple of weeks ago now, I think, and the police are looking in at corporate manslaughter charges, possibly for the 5,500 deaths during COVID. But as part of the conversations we've been having through Zoom, Leslie also mentioned about the deaths of Andrew Slorence and Millie Main and a few others like that, and the deaths of a lot of children, it must be said as well. And of course Leslie's in contact with the relevant families. She deals with it as well. So this is an aside. This is a separate thing from like the COVID stuff, but it's all part of that greater cover-up of deaths within the GCC that she was sort of also investigating alongside that. I mean, it's all interrelated because it's all to do with the way that care is administered, the way that facts are covered up. And the SNP, of course, have been very careful in saying, oh, yes, look, we're cooperating fully with the police, we're open, we're honest, and we're transparent. And so, therefore, you'd think that all the relevant government bodies or public bodies over which they have control or sway would equally be open, honest, transparent, and fully cooperative with the police. But it seems that isn't so. GCC, Great Glasgow and Clyde Health Board, has been telling staff not to cooperate with police, to not hand over documents or evidence, to keep their mouths shut, and to protect the bosses at all cost. Because obviously it's the bosses that are responsible, and it's the bosses that are basically trying to cover up any liability that they have for these deaths. So we'll take a look at this now, see what's going on, and just show that Leslie, it appears, was right. Here goes. So, NHS bosses advise staff to withhold documents from cops in a corporate homicide probe. Why are the bosses of this hospital and this health board saying don't hand over information, don't give them documents, don't give them notes, don't give them anything, keep your mouth shut? Why are they saying that? They're obviously very, very worried. They're very, very worried that they're going to get arrested, charged, and go into prison. That's the only reason, you say don't tell anything, because you're deeply, deeply worried. Relatives of those whose deaths are part of the investigation have said health chiefs must hand over everything and shouldn't ask staff to withhold anything. And why? Why would they not? Other than the fear of going to prison, why would you not cooperate fully with the police? The only reason you would not do that is if what you've done is incredibly wrong. It's the only reason. And therefore, we can only assume from the fact that they're saying don't, that they have done something deeply wrong and they don't want the truth to come out. Staff at a scandal-hit health board have been warned not to hand over the documents to police as part of a corporate homicide probe. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde bosses have advised their employees not to take notes or documents to police interviews in case they are seized. Yeah, don't let the police have any information that they can use against us, is what they're saying there. We don't want the police coming after us, because we know, this is how I'm reading this, it may not be the case, but it's how it's reading. It's almost as though they are saying, we know we've done something seriously wrong and we don't want to be held accountable for it, and we certainly don't want to be going to prison for it. The advice is laid out in a document for staff, seen by the Sunday Mail, which discusses the criminal probe into the deaths at Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. Relatives of those whose deaths are part of the investigation have said health chiefs must hand over everything and shouldn't ask staff to withhold anything. Now, when we discussed this with Leslie a couple of discussions ago, a couple of Zoom ago, because Leslie knows all the families involved here. I mean, she's in contact with them. She knows Andrew Slorence's widow. She knows the mother of Millie Main. These are people who've died in that hospital, and she talks to them and she's spoken to them, and she is. The work she's done on this has been astounding, because it isn't just all the COVID stuff, of course. There's other things, and this is where we have mentioned in the past about things, the infection control, having pigeon droppings everywhere in the AC not being suitable. Indeed, the AC itself being carcinogenic. They used the wrong materials. The materials they used were carcinogenic. There was moulds, there was fungus infections running rife through the hospital, which they knew at the time of construction and did nothing about. So that's how serious this is. Anyway, Kimberly Garrick, whose daughter Millie Main's death is being probed, said, "I plead with the health board to let the police do their job, and I hope one day justice is delivered for Millie and those who died." This health board don't want justice because they know they're the ones that will be paying for it. Police have been investigating 10-year-old Millie's death, along with the deaths of 49-year-old Scottish Government advisor Andrew Slorence, 73-year-old mum Gail Armstrong, 3-year-old Mason Gemat, and an unnamed 10-year-old boy, for almost 2 years. All 5 people had been receiving treatment for cancer at the £842 million super hospital in Glasgow when they contracted rare infections and died. NHS GC chiefs have said there's no evidential link between different bacteria that infected the patients and bacteria present at the hospital. Well, if you're not presenting evidence and you're not letting the police do the investigation, how does anyone know? We're not going to take your word for it. You've got vested interest in getting off scot-free. A public inquiry is underway looking at the QEUH's problems, including construction and handling of concerns about infection control before the site even opened, which we've discussed again with Leslie. And there's Louise Lawrence. It was her husband Andrew who died. And also incidentally, as an aside, and I've done the video on this as well. After he died, and she was like raising complaints and wanting to know the full story about what happened. The hospital, the QEUH, actually paid private investigators to investigate her. Who do they think they are? They wasted money, thousands upon thousands of pounds, to investigate her rather than find out the truth of what killed her husband and then trying to fix it. But the fact is that they knew these infections were in the hospital as it was being built and decided that they would do nothing. And that's why they need this to go away. They need it covered up because they know that if it all comes out, they could face charges. They knowingly opened a hospital that had a high infection risk. An NHGCC frequently asked questions document for all staff states some may receive a letter from Police Scotland making reference to the Corporate Manslaughter and Corporate Homicide Act 2007. And it explains corporate homicide is where a gross breach of duty of care to the deceased by the organisation is established and which has caused or contributed to the death, and that it is concerned with corporate liability and does not apply to directors or other individuals who have senior or junior role in the company or organisation. Basically, they're saying they don't want to be held accountable for things that have happened. There, directors and other individuals who have senior or junior roles in there. Does not apply. They don't want it to apply to them. Please hide the evidence. Please cover it up. We don't want to be held liable so that we have to go to jail. They're running scared. But if they weren't liable, they'd have nothing to be scared about. Draw your own conclusions. It then says what staff should do at a police interview and states it is recommended that you do not bring any documentation or notes with you to the interview as police officers can take possession of these. It later states that if the police ask for documents, staff should tell them to contact a senior official at the NHS GC and that gives them time because then they know, it gives them time to lose the information rather than present it. You know, oh, we don't know where it's gone, burning, shredding, destroying as they go. Police need to go into this hospital en masse and start picking everything out. Louise Lawrence, whose husband Andrew's death is part of the probe, said, "This communication begs the question, what is the NHS GC hiding? All communication, documentation and clinical notes should be freely available to police without needing to go through a nominated health board individual. They should be presented immediately now. To enable a full and open investigation, police should seize all relevant information at the earliest possible stage to stop them destroying it." Millie's mum, Kimberly, said, "I find this very concerning. It appears to be yet another attempt at hiding the truth from us and from all the other families affected. If the NHS GGC has nothing to hide, it would let staff hand over all documents and notes that the police asked for. We've been let down by the management at every turn, and they all know why. They all know. This is because ultimately this comes from the top. This comes from Nicola Sturgeon, Jean Freeman. They were in charge at the time. This has come down from them. And then, of course, for the previous 2 years, who was the health secretary? Why, it was Humza Yousaf. Gosh, I wonder why the hospital is hiding everything. They might have been complicit in the instructions coming down from on high. They could all be open to investigation, charges, and then a trial." Scottish Deputy Leader Jackie Bailey, MSP, said, "Instead of helping people get answers, the leadership of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde have once again elected to fight transparency at every turn. From spying on patients and their families to using tactics like this to evade scrutiny. I hope, for the sake of the grieving families at the heart of this scandal, that this inquiry will deliver the justice we've been waiting for so many years for. It won't. They'll be out now, shredding everything, destroying it, losing the records, making sure no evidence remains that points in their direction. The police need to be in there today." The NHS GGC said, "The recommendation made to staff about bringing documents to interviews is advisory only. NHS GGC has mutually agreed processes in place with Police Scotland, whereby requests for documentation are made via our programme management office, who validate each document and provide it directly to the police. They lie. NHS GGC remains completely committed to complying and cooperating fully with any police investigation," which is quite clearly bullshit when you're telling staff to not bring documents to the station with you, to not bring your notes, and they actually highlighted the bit, not implicate management. They actually went out of their way to highlight that. What conclusions can we draw from this? I leave that up to you, good viewer, but I'm going to round off and come up. Now, what has happened, we don't know. What the conversations were, we don't know. What the written instructions were, we don't know. Who's involved? We don't know. However, the very fact that this is existing, that they're telling staff, don't take anything to the police with you, don't tell the police anything, and highlighting the fact that they don't want the senior management implicated on corporate homicide, is telling. And of course all of this was run under the auspices of an SNP government, under not one but two different health secretaries, one of whom is also being investigated for all the COVID deaths, the other one that is definitely involved in some kind of chicanery with this, I think. He either knew what was going on, or if he didn't know what was going on, he was so useless at his job he shouldn't have had it. So he was undoubtedly informed about the investigations. He's not come forward and instructed the information to be released. You have to ask why that is. Why is no one at the political level allowing this information to come out and instructing people to do it? Are they implicated? The bosses at the NHS Trust, the fact that they're saying, please don't take anything, don't say anything, don't do anything, don't name us. Why not? If they're innocent, they should be quite happy to release everything to the police. Again, draw your own conclusion why they're not happy for that to happen. Why were they investigating patients? Why were they putting private investigators onto patients? Is it to find something that they could use to blackmail the patients into withdrawing complaints? Is that what was going on? It's all very shady, isn't it? And it goes to show the kind of almost Soviet or even Stasi attitude that these organisations in Scotland have against their own people, because they know if the people knew what was going on, there'd be a revolution. And it's things like this that start revolutions. Now, if this hospital and its board are guilty of corporate homicide, and that can be linked to the SNP, which I'm sure it's possible, then it would destroy the SNP forever. And that's before you even get into the COVID investigation. So I think there's going to be a lot of very, very worried people, especially at the very high pinnacle of the SNP over this. How much did they know? How much did they control? Did they give instructions? Are they furiously destroying evidence as we speak? I'll stop now. Thank you very much for watching. If you like what you hear and see on the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help, and it gets the truth out there. The more people subscribe, the more times the truth like this gets out. Now, I do hope to be speaking to Leslie later about this particular subject, but that's up to her. Whether I can or not is another matter, but I will try to. But as for the rest of you, do please take great care. Don't go to hospital if you can avoid it, because you just can't trust them. They're dangerous, and they'll cover it up, and they will hide it, and they don't care. Let's hope the police do uncover it and get to the truth of it, and get these people arrested, tried, charged, and jailed. Anyway, thank you, and goodbye.